This week on Inside the Investigations, 4 Texas justices of the peace are raising concerns about the backlog of families waiting to learn what caused their loved one's death. The judges work in one of the largest counties in Texas without a medical examiner, leaving them to determine cause and manner of death.
We have no medical training. None of us have any kind of medical training. So
KXAN investigative reporter Arzo Dost describes the pain families face as they wait for answers. And good morning to you all. Thanks so much for joining us here on KXAN Live. I'm Will Dupree coming to you from the KXAN Live studio, and we're going to be focusing on Inside the Investigations. This is our weekly deep dive into some of the reporting that our team here at KXAN has done, some of the incredible work that they've highlighted in the last week. And joining me, as always, is investigative reporter Kelly Wiley. So Kelly, thank you so much for being here. As always, it's nice to see you.
It's nice to be here in the new studio. This is my first time.
This is a nice, new, clean space, and we're debuting it right here with you. And we have a reporter joining us who turned an incredibly interesting story that's affecting families and some of the elected officials up in Williamson County. So let's bring into the conversation now Arzo Dost. Arzo, nice to see you. Thank you for being here, too.
Good morning, Will and Kelly. Thanks for having me.
Arzo, this is one of my favorite stories so far this year. It was so interesting what these JPs were saying, what the woman in your story was saying. So let's just jump in because your story revolves around Williamson County. It's about 45 minutes outside of Austin. And in the last decade, it's changed a lot, right?
Kelly, it's one of the fastest growing counties in our area. And if you just go down 183 Mopag, the growth is evident as you go into Round Rock, Georgetown, Leander, Liberty Hill. Just so much growth, a lot of families moving here. But even though there's been this massive growth here, some things just have not changed, like how manner and cause of death is determined in this county.
So in your story, it's this amazing shot of these 4 justices of the peace, which kind of to me was striking because it's very rare that we see people in these types of roles sit down and say there's a problem. Not, in society, but a problem with our system and the way that it's working. These 4 justices of the peace say they have no medical training, but they're tasked with determining cause of death for a growing county. How does this impact people in Williamson?
Well, Kelly, thanks for bringing up that point as far as getting them all together. It is no easy task because of their schedules. They are, one, handling their court dockets day to day, and then they're being, called. They each take an on-call shift for 7 days a week for 24 hours. So they get called during the day, during the night. So the fact that we were able to sit down with them, you're right, is very rare. But we asked to sit down with them after we got a tip from a Round Rock family telling us kind of what they were experiencing. They had a loved one that had passed away, and they had to wait for a JP to respond. And then that JP had to make the decision to send that case in to get an autopsy. And that's where the problem comes in. These autopsies are being sent elsewhere, either a local private firm or neighboring Travis County Medical Examiner's office. And sometimes the autopsies are taking up to 8 months to get back. And so not only are the judges dealing with that, but they're responding to death after death. And on some weeks, they told us they respond to 20 to 30 deaths on top of holding court.
And I had someone tell me this week, what gets measured gets fixed. And you did a lot of measurement in this story showing the data behind this problem. Can you break down what this looks like beyond Cindy, who's in your story, her family?
Right. That's a great point because, in Texas, out of our 254 counties, there's only one of the lawmakers in our area shared with us. There's only about 20 ME offices, and some in the talks still or in the process of being established. And so for the majority of our counties, JPs are handling cause and manner of death. And some of the counties are smaller, but the problem is when growth comes in. For instance, growth was not that big of an issue more than a decade ago in this area. So a JP says they were able to handle not only their court dockets, but also the death calls that were coming in, the death investigations, but data that we were able to access and kind of see what we're talking about shows that in the past decade in Williamson County, these justice of the peaces have responded, to so many deaths that it's gone up 120%. So we're talking about 10 years ago, they were responding to a little more than 460 deaths to now responding to more than 1,000 deaths. And as I mentioned, in some cases, the judges say there are weeks where they're responding to 20 and 30 deaths a week.
I just want to get into this, though, because you're explaining the data and it's striking. I mean, to go from 400 plus cases to more than 1,000 is certainly a difference, especially when there's not been any systemic change to handle that growth. But the family in your story, I mean, I think when you hear what they went through, it makes sense why this is such a problem. You introduce us to Cindy. Tell us about what she was telling you. There was one thing that she said in her interview about her way to work that really resonated with me, but tell us more about what she was going through specifically.
Well, Cindy Dennis Pollard, really helped us understand what we're dealing with in Williamson County. Her father passed away several years ago, and his death had to be sent in for an autopsy. It took 8 months for the autopsy to be completed. In the meantime, Cindy says her family had no closure. They could not move forward because her father's body was still getting through the autopsy, as she put it, in a freezer. And every day as she went to work, she would pass by his body, wondering when they would be able to have access to it so they could have some closure, they could do a memorial, they could say their goodbyes. And as I mentioned, this is one family. The family who originally told us about this, sent us a tip asking us to look into this. They had a similar situation where an uncle passed away, and they could not believe, they said they were surprised that this county, this size, does not have a medical examiner. Because keep in mind, it's not that the justices of the peace can't do the job. It's just that it's not gotten sustainable anymore because as more people have moved here, there's more deaths and more complex cases, which means those complex cases have to now get sent in for an autopsy, and the turnaround is just taking long.
Of course, we're hearing these personal stories, and perhaps those will resonate with some of the elected leaders there in Williamson County, in addition to these 4 justices of the peace raising a megaphone to this too. But Arzo, when you were looking into your story, what is perhaps the solution for Williamson County?
Well, that's a good question. Well, we asked Williamson County that very question, where is the county in this process? And we were referred to the Texas law, which we're digging a little deeper into. But recently, the law was changed where if your population is 2.5 million, you need to have a medical examiner's office. But if you haven't met that population, then it's up to the commissioner's court to decide to establish one or not. So where we are in Williamson County, I was told by a spokesperson with the county that this has not been discussed publicly yet, so they had no comment and they referred us to the law. But what we did discover is that one of the commissioners took a tour, a field trip, if you will, to Fort Bend County in the Houston area with the JPs. They wanted to essentially see how Fort Bend County established their medical examiner's office and how they came up with the funding, because that's ultimately what it comes down to, funding. The county is going to have to pay for this. And the judges say, look, we're already paying upwards $3,500 for each autopsy, that there's got to be a way we can figure out how to establish a medical examiner's office and then have our own autopsies done and make that investment in our own community.
Yeah, of course, the time and the money are big concerns for these elected officials. But, for the JPs, what do they say will happen if the county does not invest in its own medical examiner?
Well, they're going to continue to do their jobs because they were voted in and they took an oath. They say they are so proud of the work that they do. Their dockets have grown over time, right? And so they're not only handling truancy cases, medical debt cases, They're also marrying people, and then they're responding to these death calls, which they say they take very seriously. And they say the bottom line is it's just not sustainable. There's 4 of them. There's more than 700. We're nearing 700,000 people in Williamson County. And they say that's what it comes down to, just not being sustainable. I'll also tell you that the county says there's going to be budget talks starting at the end of this month. And the JPs are hoping that there will be some kind of discussion about their needs now.
Just to circle back around, because at the end of the day, I think what your story highlights is that this has a profound impact on families when they're kind of waiting in limbo. I'm curious, what happened with Cindy's father's case? Did she ever learn more about what caused his death?
Well, Kelly, 8 months after waiting, she did get a death certificate back. She tells us, and she shared with us, the death certificate said that the manner of death could not be determined. And that was really heartbreaking because 1, she says that they had to wait for so long, but 2, her dad wanted his organs donated. And she says that just was not possible because 8 months had passed, and there was no known cause of what exactly happened to him.
And also, we were focusing on what some of these justices of the peace had felt about this. Did you have a chance to speak to law enforcement about what they thought about the lack of a medical examiner there in Williamson County?
Well, we have not only talked to law enforcement, we've talked to other justices of the peace around us in our neighboring counties to kind of get a sense of, is this sustainable? I mean, what are we looking at? And everyone you talk to will tell you, including residents who are finding out that they're surprised that there is no medical examiner's office. And to put it pointedly, for law enforcement in our area, we talked to the Williamson County Sheriff. He says, look, our county is growing so much. There's multiple law enforcement that respond to a scene. And so in one day, you could have multiple scenes at the same time. And so the JPs have to respond to those death calls, right? And so that delays the process of getting the investigation going because law enforcement can't do anything until the JP arrives to look at whatever the situation is and start the investigation. So there is a, impact on our law enforcement. And also the judges say with their dockets growing, it just puts more demand on them, and they're trying to wrap up situations as quickly as possible and get to a scene as quickly as possible because that's the priority.
Arzo, thank you so much. I'm putting my stamp on it. This is my favorite investigation of the year. I just think it's so eye-opening what's going on, and it reminds you that small decisions, or what feels like small decisions by local municipalities, have a profound impact on law enforcement, on our judicial system, on families' well-being, on potentially saving another life, considering he wanted to donate his organs. So thank you for this report.
Thank you guys for having me. And, this isn't the last of it. We're continuing to dig into this and have a better understanding of what it will take and where we can get the funding. We're asking the county those questions, and so we'll see if we learn more.
Yeah, it will be fascinating to see what the budget discussions are like this round because those can get very contentious, as obviously there's lots of funding priorities for the county. So let's see if this rises to the top. Again, investigative reporter Arzo Dost, thank you for being here. We so appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
All right, everybody. That is Arzo Dost. Kelly, such a great story.
I know.
I would hope that people would go to our website and check that out if they can. It's
so well told. Arzo is one of we have incredible storytellers, but she's one of my favorites. She's so good at bringing it back to people. And I love that about her. So please watch it. It's very good.
All right, everybody. We will be back next week for another edition of Inside the Investigations to highlight yet another great report from our investigative team here at KXAN. Kelly, thank you for being with us, as always.
Thank you. I've enjoyed my first time in the new studio.
Yeah, it looks nice, everybody. That is Kelly Wiley. I'm Will Dupree. We will see you back here at another time. Hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. Take care, stay safe and healthy out there.